So the panel before this one talked about policy from politicians and elected officials, and yeah, the third question is more so about what more can politicians do, and where can we push them towards in order to combat a lot of what we're talking about. Yeah, and I think there's this quote that Toni Morrison talked about work, and she says, "You make the job, and the job doesn't make you." Um, and so politicians have the power to at least affect what happens to us on a day-to-day basis. They may be, at least in my personal opinion, I don't think they're going to be the ones to bring us to liberation, but they will be at least a tool to get us there. And so what more can politicians be doing in order to create this new world that we're talking about?
I think politicians should be in Pittsburgh, should be listening more. It reminds me a lot of times the politicians, the political game that is played reminds me of when you look at a room full of white men talking about a woman's body, what they're going to do. It's, we talk about the youth a lot, and we don't have the youth at the table. Or we'll talk about senior citizens, and we have not asked not one senior citizen. So what happens is they'll, unfortunately, majority of our elected officials is more concerned with power and not the people. So they don't know, they'll make policy about a community that, one, they don't live in, two, they haven't talked to anyone that live in that community, and now that list can go on and on. So I just think that and showing up for arenas like this, not being afraid to hear us, because a lot of times, especially elected official, if it's not a comfortable space, they don't come. They just don't. They're not going to come. So when you show up to something like this, or to just listen, or show up in a space to just listen, and you're an elected official, to me, you are looked at. You have so many points. You have just gained so many points. But I still would say that I'll knock on doors for them, and I'll not, because they have came to here and see that, showed me that I'm important of whatever I got to say. So yeah, I'll knock on doors. Yeah, I'll make phone calls. Yeah, but I'll still be saying, but hire me.
I think one thing is just for more of us to consider third parties. I've been able to go to a couple of meetings that Khalid Rahim with the New African Independence Party has held around reparations, and for me, that's not an accident that didn't come from the Democratic Party. And so I guess for me, when I was a teenager, I worked on Lenore Fulani's campaign for president. It was a long time, well, not that long, but it's the 80s. And so I felt like I saw there so many ideas I had never considered. It was like this whole world opened up. And I think that's one of the ways white supremacy shows up in Pittsburgh, is that we conflate the Democratic Party with politics, with representation, and it really stultifies our thinking across all kinds of policies. Policies I think we could put even into gear in our nonprofits. We could think about ideas of reparations inside our nonprofits. We could think about a whole bunch of concepts, but we don't have access to them because of the ubiquity of the Democratic Party's ideas about what's possible. And I just saw an article the other day about titled "Yes We Can't," Barack Obama's legacy. And I think that there is a limit to our thinking that we have gotten, and we call it being strategic here. I'm going to be strategic, which means I'm going to get what I want later, which I don't see that as strategy. So that for me is one piece I would add.
when I say to, if any elected officials that's in here, when I say like or someone when you're having a conversation, when I say something like hire me, I mean hire people that look like me or hire people with colorful backgrounds, not me per se.
I'm sitting here thinking of like past legislation. Like I'm going back through history, so I'm thinking of like the Homestead Act in like the 1860s, right? Pittsburgh has a lot of vacant land and parcels. Wouldn't it be nice if there could be some level of legislation in Pittsburgh similar to the Homestead Act, but that focused on redistributing this land to Black people, to build on, to renovate, to start their own businesses. Like there's nothing new under the sun, so it just seems like to me, if we look back and then start looking at like these systematically racist policies that were created at one point in time and say, how can we right the wrongs of the past? That's how you do it. I'm just trying to think outside of the box a little bit, but you know, it's within the politician's grasp, I think, to do something like this. Distribute that land. I'm tired of the community that I live in not thriving. There was a report that came out a few years ago called African American Neighborhoods of Choice Report, and one of the findings out of that report was that African Americans live in neighborhoods that they wouldn't recommend to friends or family interested in moving to the city. That says a lot. So that's my one idea for what it's worth.
I think about and with that question, and also with the great responses that I've heard so far. When a person's done wrong, and the person who did that wrong tries to fix it, there has to be an acknowledgement of the wrong first, right? And I think that an acknowledgement of the intentionality behind the disparity, behind the violence, behind the displacement. Just saying, like, you know what, yes, this shit was intentional. We did this on purpose. I'm from East Liv, grew up 3 blocks away from Paramount Street, 700 block of Mellon Street. Probably played basketball, played more basketball at the courts right outside of Peabody. It used to be Peabody High School, it's now Obama, than I've played anywhere else. And this neighborhood looks like a spaceship landed. And just flatten out everything that existed before. Particularly when you get into the business district and you get closer to, what I guess what's called East Side, wherever the fuck now. And just seeing and recognizing all of the culture that existed there, and all that gone, displaced, Penley gone. The Kingsley Center, which used to be where the busway gone. David Shoes, everyone knows the David Shoes commercial jingle. If you're from Pittsburgh, you got your shoes from David's. Like, everybody knows that. Gone. And there are more businesses that I can name. And again, Channel Lounge. And again, an acknowledgement of, we wanted to get all the Black people out of here, all the low-income people out of here, so we could, get Burger here, so we could get Trader Joe's here, so we could get Warby Parker, and I'm wearing Warby Parker glasses, but so we could get Warby Parker here, and, and again, I just think that even before some of the changes that were suggested by the people on the panel, just an acknowledgement of, we did this, and that even comes before the apology. Yeah. I think just an acknowledgement that what we are experiencing, what we saw, was real.
think politicians could do is be honest. But in realizing that politicians can't do anything without us, I just want to echo that, right? I don't want to demystify of what political office is. And, a politician only has as much power as we give them. And so the onus is not on either side, it's on us working together. And so, what some politicians can do is retire. Be gone. Because everybody is not to be worked with. And we're in the process of doing that one by one, picking them off, and we have to continue to do that. If we're going to make change, progress can be slow, but it's going to happen. And two, to really work with grassroots organizations, right? So you have political officials pushing policies, pushing legislation, but you don't have advocates coming up there pushing. Like if you're pushing for something it's not wanted, you can't do that alone. If you know that, this is something that is not popular, it's a different narrative, white folks are going to push back on it, money's going to push back on it, then you need to work with grassroots folks because you need all the people up there to speak to that, to push that, to get the communities organized to vote for it. And I don't think politicians do that enough. I don't think they proactively seek out folks on the ground to partner with when they're pushing legislation. For once, to even see what the wording should be, right? They think they have to go to attorneys all the time. Like the attorney can fine tune it, but people know what they need. People know what's happening to them. People know what the legislation should say, even if they don't know the technical terminology. The other thing is, I think politicians could be more courageous. I think a lot of things are not done out of fear. I think they're afraid of backlash. They're afraid of, we had, people running for one of the most powerful seats in the county, which is district attorney's office. But do you know how many people were afraid, literally afraid to come out and openly support anybody opposing to Paula? Not because they like him, not because they think he's good, but because they were afraid of what he would do after the fact. And it's happening, right? And so, they can have more courage because if more people stood up, there wouldn't be this one person out there to attack or two people out there to attack. You would have 50 folks that you would have to worry about. And so you would have a lot more trouble than it's worth. So if more people are courageous, it would really help out the other politicians or political officials who are progressive. I also think that they can stop being loyal to parties and be more loyal to issues. I think this whole loyalty to parties is ridiculous, and I think it keeps us in a place where people are like, there's rules. If you're a committee person, you can't be against another person that's on the Democratic Party, even if they are against everybody in your family. It just doesn't make any sense. And so lastly, I think that political officials could push to change some of the laws that constrain them from the freedoms that they need to have in these seats, right? I know Bethany was talking about doing some of that. I don't know if you know that. If you have a criminal record, you're prevented from running for office. And if somebody, it only is a big issue if somebody contests you, but best believe if you're Black, you're going to get contested, right? And so it happens all the time. A person in McKeesport wanted to run for office. He had a record from umpteen years ago, and it was contested because some folks in power didn't want that seat to be taken. And so those type of things, I think political officials could be working on changing because it stops the shift in the dynamics of power that we need to happen.
And I think now we're going to open it up to some Q&A. And I think there's a link. Okay. So if you all want to submit your questions to Pigeonhole, that's what it's called. I'm going to need access to this.